picture this. You're at a crowded wedding reception, right?
Ah,
You're happily chewing on a cocktail wiener, just completely minding your own business.
yeah.
Or, maybe you're in one of those high-stakes Zoom meetings.
Oh, the worst.
Yeah, you've mentally checked out for just a second to think about, like, what you're having for lunch. And suddenly, out of nowhere, you hear your name. And then comes the question that strikes just like visceral, ice-cold terror into the hearts of so many of us. So what do you think?
It really is, it's the ultimate ambush. I mean, you don't have a script. You have zero time to prepare. And suddenly the spotlight is just blindingly entirely on you.
Exactly.
Mm.
And the wildest part is how your body just immediately betrays you. You get this instant, terrifying biological reaction.
Mm.
It's this massive plumbing reversal.
Oh, yeah, the plumbing reversal. It's so real.
Right. The places on your body that are normally dry, like your palms or your forehead, they suddenly become completely drenched in sweat. And the places that are normally moist, like the inside of your mouth, just go bone dry.
Mm.
You go to speak, and your brain is just flatlined.
Yeah. And you know what? That happens to absolutely everyone. It does not matter how famous or wealthy or, traditionally successful you are.
Oh, for sure.
A perfect example of this happened at the 2014 Consumer Electronics Show. Michael Bay, the billionaire director behind massive blockbuster movies like Transformers.
Oh, man. Yeah, Transformers, Armageddon.
Exactly. He was giving this big keynote presentation, and mid-speech, his teleprompter just failed.
Oh, no. That is literally the nightmare scenario.
Total nightmare. And keep in mind, he was up there to talk about his own movies.
Mhm.
This is a subject he literally knows better than any other human being on Earth.
Right.
But because that comforting script vanished and he was suddenly forced to, improvise in front of thousands of people, he completely froze. He couldn't string a single sentence together.
Wow.
He muttered a quick apology, turned around, and just walked off the stage.
Just walked away.
Yeah.
Which is wild to think about, but it really proves something important, right? Spontaneous communication is not this innate magical talent that you're either born with or you aren't. It is a distinct skill.
It absolutely is a skill, and it's one you can learn.
Yeah, and that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We are breaking down Matt Abraham's framework from his book, Think Faster, Talk Smarter. We're going to hand you a 6-step methodology to take that sweaty-palmed panic of being put on the spot and transform it into an actual opportunity.
An opportunity to, connect, to collaborate, and maybe even have a little bit of fun with it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because it seems like before we can even worry about what words to say, we have to deal with the fact that our bodies literally think we're being chased by a bear. You can't outthink a biological fight-or-flight response, can you?
You really can't. I mean, what's fascinating here is the sheer physical takeover that happens in those moments of ambush.
Yeah.
To understand it, we have to look at the ABCs of anxiety.
Okay, ABCs. What are those?
So A is affective. That's how you feel emotionally, right? You feel incredibly vulnerable, judged, maybe overwhelmed.
Definitely overwhelmed.
Right. Then B is behavioral. That is the physical plumbing reversal we just mentioned. Your heart is racing, you're sweating, your hands are visibly shaking.
The fun stuff.
Exactly. And C is cognitive. Your brain either goes completely blank or you suddenly hear this incredibly loud, negative inner voice just screaming that you are about to publicly fail.
But wait, if that's what's happening to me, is the goal to feel zero anxiety? Because I'll be honest, if I'm staring down a CEO or like a hostile room, feeling completely zen just feels impossible. Trying to stop anxiety by ignoring it feels like trying to stop a speeding car by taking your hands off the steering wheel. You have to actively steer the biology, right?
That is a perfect analogy. You absolutely have to steer it because the goal is not zero anxiety. A little bit of stress is actually good for you.
It is.
Yeah. It primes your brain, brings blood to your muscles, it makes you sharp. The problem happens when we try to completely suppress the panic, or when we use that terrible cliche advice everyone hears like, just picture the audience in their underwear.
Oof. I always hated that advice. It just distracts you. Now I'm anxious and thinking about weird underwear.
Exactly. It takes you completely out of the moment. Instead, Harvard researcher Alison Wood Brooks found this brilliantly simple biological hack. She pointed out that anxiety and excitement are actually almost identical states of high physical arousal.
Wait, really? Like biologically?
Yeah, practically the same. Your heart beats fast, you get butterflies, you breathe heavily in both states. So instead of trying to slam on the brakes and force yourself to calm down, which just doesn't work, you just relabel the arousal.
Relabel it. Like how?
You literally say out loud, I am excited. You take that speeding car and you just steer it into a positive lane.
I love the mechanics of that. You aren't fighting the energy, you're just rebranding it. But I do have a question about the physical stuff. Rebranding is great for the mindset, but what about the physical shaking and the sweating? I mean, I can't just rebrand a puddle of sweat on my forehead. How do I actually hack the nervous system to stop that?
For the physical symptoms, you have to use physiological levers. Andrew Huberman, the neuroscientist, points out that the magic of physically calming down is entirely in the exhalation.
The exhale, okay.
Yeah, when you exhale, you are reducing carbon dioxide in your lungs, which basically acts as a biological brake pedal for your nervous system. So the rule of thumb is to make your exhalations twice as long as your inhalations.
Okay, so like breathing in for a count of 3 and out for a count of 6.
Exactly. In for 3, out for 6. That signals your vagus nerve to physically slow your heart rate down in a matter of seconds.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
You're basically manually overriding the panic alarm. And there's a trick for the sweating and blushing too, isn't there? Because I know when I'm put on the spot, I can feel my face get incredibly hot.
Yes. When stress hits, it spikes your core body temperature. So you can actively cool it down by just holding a cold water bottle in your hand.
Just holding it.
Yeah, your palms are essentially thermal radiators. By cooling your palms, you trick your entire body into dropping its core temperature, which literally stops the sweating and the blushing.
That is genius. Just keep a cold water bottle handy. But, okay, here is the biological hack that absolutely blew my mind when I was reading through this material. The cure for filler words. The ums and us techs.
Oh, this one is great.
Everyone hates them. Everyone uses them. How do we biologically stop them?
This is such a cool mechanical trick because it relies on a completely inescapable fact of human anatomy. It is physically impossible to say, or while you are inhaling.
Wait, really? Let me try that. Like trying to say, while breathing in?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I sound like I'm choking.
Right. You literally can only speak when you are pushing air out of your vocal cords.
Exactly.
Precisely. So if you want to eliminate filler words, you have to do what gymnasts do. You have to stick the landing.
Stick the landing. I like that.
When you finish a sentence or a thought, instead of dragging out the vowel into an you deliberately close your mouth, stop speaking, and take a breath in. You physically cannot say a filler word while doing that.
Okay, so let's say I've used the breathing. I'm holding my cold water bottle, and my body is finally calm. The panic alarm is off, but there is still a massive problem. My brain is completely frozen.
The blank brain.
Yeah. When I'm put on the spot, even if I'm not panicking, I just spit out the most boring, robotic, generic answer possible. Why does that happen?
Because your brain loves to save energy, so it defaults to heuristics. Heuristics are basically mental shortcuts.
Yeah.
In everyday life, they keep us safe and, save us calories.
Like habits.
Yeah. If you see a red octagonal sign, you don't stop and analyze its geometric meaning. You just stop the car. It's an automatic script.
It sounds to me like heuristics are essentially an overzealous autocorrect on your phone. Like your brain thinks it's helping you type faster and saving you effort, but it ends up changing your unique, nuanced thought into a totally generic cliche.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
So how do we turn off the autocorrect in our brains without totally blanking out?
We have to actively practice breaking our brain's desperate need to be correct and literal. There is this fantastic improv game called Shout the Wrong Name.
Okay, how does that work?
The rules are simple. You walk around a room, you point at objects, and you confidently call them by the completely wrong name.
Okay, I'm going to try this right now. I'm pointing at my microphone,
Huh.
and I'm calling it a toaster. Wait, that actually took a split second of effort. My brain really wanted to say microphone.
Exactly. It sounds ridiculously easy, but adults struggle with this immensely. The cognitive load of suppressing the right answer and inventing a wrong one is surprisingly heavy because our brains are hardwired to categorize things perfectly.
We want the right answer.
We do. But that intense desire for perfection kills spontaneity. It locks you into the most predictable path.
That makes me think of that amazing anecdote about the Stanford $5 challenge.
Oh, that's a classic.
Yeah, so teams of business students were given $5 in 2 hours to make as much money as possible. If they just followed the standard heuristic, like the autocorrect for making money, they would do what most teams did, right?
Right. Most teams used the $5 to buy supplies for a car wash or a lemonade stand, and they made, a few extra bucks.
But the winning team, they did something totally different.
They realized that the standard heuristic was a trap. They ignored the $5 entirely. They looked at the situation and realized their most valuable asset wasn't the starting capital. It was the 3 minutes of presentation time they were promised in front of the whole class at the end of the challenge.
Which is brilliant.
Right. So they sold that 3-minute advertising slot to a corporate recruiting company for $650.
$650. They completely broke the mental shortcut. And that really highlights this concept of maximizing mediocrity. Which, I mean, sounds terrible. Who wants to be mediocre?
I know, it sounds bad.
But the point is, to be truly spontaneous, you have to dare to be dull.
It sounds counterintuitive, but it's essential. The pressure to deliver a flawless TED Talk level response perfectly on the spot is exactly what paralyzes us.
Right.
If you give yourself permission to just be average, to give a mediocre answer, you suddenly free up all that cognitive bandwidth you were using to judge yourself. And magically, your authentic personality can come through.
You stop fighting yourself.
Yeah. You start treating mistakes not as catastrophic, career-ending failures, but as missed takes. Like a movie director shooting a scene from a different angle. It wasn't the wrong take, it was just a different take.
Okay, so I dropped the perfectionism. I dare to be dull. But now I just have this empty space in my head where my script used to be. If I'm not agonizing over my own brilliant response, what am I supposed to be doing?
You replace that internal panic with hyper-awareness of your external environment. You replace it with listening, and I mean really deeply listening.
What did that actually look like in practice, though? Especially in a high-stakes meeting where, money is on the line?
There's a perfect story about this involving Fred Dust. He's an incredibly successful consultant, and he was advising the Greek government during their massive, crippling debt crisis.
Okay, high stakes.
Extremely high stakes. His job was to convince them to sell a derelict, completely abandoned oceanfront airport to foreign developers.
Makes sense. They need cash.
Right. On paper, it was a purely financial, logical presentation. They needed the money. Here was a buyer. But as he sat in the room, instead of just reading his script, he paid attention. He picked up on this subtle, heavy ambivalence in the room.
Like they were hesitating.
Yeah, the officials were logically nodding, but non-verbally, their posture was slumped. They were mourning. They were losing the last piece of public oceanfront property in Athens.
Wow. So what did he do? Did he just push through the slides?
No, he scrapped his script entirely. He stopped pitching the sale and just validated their sadness. He literally said, I can see how hard this is. This is a profound loss for your city.
That's huge.
And because he listened to the emotional temperature of the room, the prime minister pulled him aside later and deeply thanked him. They ended up not selling the land, and they saved a huge piece of their cultural heritage.
That is incredible, and you can contrast that so perfectly with the story of the Hollywood executive traveling to Japan.
Oh, this one hurts.
It does. So he walks into a high-level meeting, and the Japanese executives carefully present him with their business cards, which is a huge sign of respect there. And this guy, entirely focused on his own mental script and his own agenda, just grabs the cards and thoughtlessly shoves them into his back pocket.
Oh, it is physically painful to hear. He completely missed the tense, profoundly offended nonverbal cues of the entire room. He wasn't listening with his eyes or his intuition. That's why listening requires a specific framework: pace, space, and grace. You slow your pace, you create space for reflection, and you offer yourself grace when things go wrong.
I really love how a journalist named Debra Schifrin uses the space part of that. She asks something called the killer last question.
Oh, yeah, that's a great technique.
Yeah, at the end of an interview, she just asks, is there anything else? And then she waits. She just lets the dead space stretch out.
Yeah.
And almost always, the person can't handle the silence, so they fill it with the most profound, interesting thought of the entire conversation.
And creating that space relies heavily on the core principle of improv comedy, which is yes and, opposed to yes but. Think about how improvisers train. They play a game called the invisible gift box.
Wait, I haven't heard of this one. How does it work?
Okay, so imagine two people on stage. Person A hands person B an imaginary box. Person B opens it and has to declare what's inside. Let's say person B says, "Oh, wow, it's a live frog."
A frog? Nice.
If person A responds with yes, but, they might say, "Yes, but it's actually dead," or "Yes, but why did you drop it?" They immediately inject conflict and kill the momentum. The scene just grinds to a halt.
Oh, I see.
But if they use yes, and they accept the reality and add to it, "Yes, and it's wearing a tiny tuxedo," suddenly you have a scene you are building together. Yes, but destroys momentum. Yes, and creates collaboration.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. It's incredibly easy to say, use dead space or play yes and when you're dealing with a polite interview subject or like a comedy partner. But what if you're put on the spot with hostile pushback? What if there is a literal heckler in the audience screaming at you?
That is actually the ultimate test of yes and. Instead of getting defensive and saying yes but, you accept the reality of the disruption and you build on it. Comedian Trevor Wallace is famous for this.
Oh yeah, his crowd work is crazy.
Right. When a heckler interrupts his stand-up, he doesn't panic. He doesn't try to shut them down instantly with cruelty. He leans in, he asks them questions, he turns their disruption into a unique viral moment that could never have been scripted.
Or what about Patricia Ryan Madsen?
Yeah.
That story gave me secondhand anxiety.
Ow, the orchestra story.
Yes. She was supposed to read a very solemn quote from Jane Stanford at a massive university event right after the orchestra finished a piece of music. So she walks up to the microphone, delivers her incredibly dramatic opening line.
And then boom!
And the orchestra suddenly starts playing their second movement. Right over.
Total public embarrassment, right?
Total nightmare.
But she gave herself grace. She didn't panic. She didn't yell at the conductor. She just walked calmly back to her seat, waited 10 full minutes for the movement to finish, walked back to the microphone, and delivered the exact same opening line with a smile. She didn't dwell on the mistake. She embodied what legendary basketball coach Mike Krzyzewski, Coach K, calls the next play mindset. Whatever you just did or whatever just happened to you is not nearly as important as what you do on the very next play.
Okay, so let's check in on where we are. We've used breathing to calm the body. We've turned off the brain's autocorrect. And we are deeply listening to the room. And yes and ing, whatever comes our way.
Sounds like a solid foundation.
But I still have to open my mouth and say something coherent. I mean, listening gets you the data, but if I just start rambling, I'm going to lose people.
Fine.
How do I organize my thoughts without producing out a script? I need a roadmap.
You do. And the concept of a roadmap comes from the idea of being a campus tour guide. When you're walking backward, leading a group of prospective students, the absolute cardinal rule is never lose your tour group.
Right.
You have to tell them where you are going, point out the landmarks, and tell them when you've arrived. Structure does the exact same thing for your audience's brain. It prevents them from wandering off mentally while you speak.
But doesn't using a formula make you sound robotic? Like if I'm just plugging my thoughts into a template, aren't I losing all that spontaneity we just work so hard to find?
It's a fascinating paradox, but having a rigid underlying skeleton actually frees up your cognitive bandwidth to be more playful and creative in the moment. Think of a master jazz musician.
Okay.
When they're improvising, they aren't just playing random notes. They are improvising over a very specific rehearsed chord progression because they know that underlying structure in their bones, they don't have to think about what note technically comes next. They can put all their energy into the style, the flair, and connecting with the audience.
Okay, so what is the chord progression for everyday conversation? Because the one that comes up is the absolute Swiss Army knife of structures is what, so what, now what?
Yes, it is incredibly effective. You explain the thing, that's the what. You explain why it matters to them, the so what, and you explain the next step, the now what.
It makes such a difference. Imagine you're in a meeting and someone asks, hey, what's going on in the software update? The rambling, unstructured version is, well, we had bugs in the code, and Jim was out sick, and it's basically a patch for the UI, but it's taking a while, so maybe next week we can look at it. You've totally lost the tour group.
Exactly. But if you apply the structure, the new software update is a complete overhaul of our user interface. That's the what. This means your teams will save roughly 2 hours a week on data entry. The so what. We need everyone to download the patch by Friday at noon, the now what.
It is punchy, clear, and totally unscripted.
There is a great example of this in action with a marketing manager named Sarah. She was running the technical side of a massive corporate Zoom call when one of the main presenters simply didn't show up.
Just ghosted the meeting.
Yeah, hundreds of people are watching. Sarah steps in, having never seen the slides before in her life, and uses this exact framework. Here is the new product. Here is why these features solve our customers' problems, and here is how you can order it today. She seamlessly saved a multi-million-dollar presentation just by trusting that simple roadmap.
That's amazing.
And part of trusting that roadmap is mastering the F word of spontaneous speaking, focus.
The F word.
Yes, focus. You have to strip away the excess. When Steve Jobs introduced the original iPod, he didn't stand on stage and read off a dense spec sheet about gigabytes, flash memory, and battery voltage. He gave a focused 5-word pitch. 1,000 songs in your pocket.
That is the ultimate example of BLUF.
Hmm.
Bottom line up front. Don't make me wait for the point. And focus isn't just about being short. It has dimensions. You have to know your goal. Like, what exactly do you want the audience to know, feel, and do?
Yes, absolutely.
And you have to ensure accessibility. This is the grandmother test. Could you explain your complex job to your grandmother without using alienating industry jargon?
Lego is completely obsessed with this idea of accessibility. They actually train their manual designers for a full year just to learn how to write those wordless, universally accessible instruction manuals. Everyone, regardless of language or age, can understand what to do next.
That's brilliant.
And a massive part of that focus is concision. Hilary Price, the comic strip artist, operates on a brilliant rule. She provides only 49% of the context in her drawings. She deliberately leaves the other 51% for the reader's brain to fill in.
Because the brain loves a puzzle.
Exactly. If she wants to show a character getting a drink thrown in their face, she doesn't draw the water splashing on them. She draws the exact moment right before the glass is tipped. When you over-explain and provide 100% of the context, you deprive the audience of the joy of getting it. You want to boil it down to the absolute essence. Just look at Google's mission statement. A $1.5 trillion company boiled down to 12 highly focused words to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful.
Wow. All right, so let's take this entire methodology. The calm biology, the unlocked mind, the deep listening, and this clear jazz chord structure. And let's apply it to the final boss of spontaneous communication.
Oh boy.
Most dreaded environment of all, small talk.
Small talk is a nightmare because this is where our mental heuristics really trap us. We get caught in the dreaded "how are you" loops.
Oh, I hate that loop.
Someone says, "How are you?" You say, "I'm good." "How are you?" They say, "I'm good." And it's just a dead end. To break out of that autopilot, you have to follow the first commandment of small talk. Make it about them, not you.
Which is such a mindset shift. Because small talk is usually treated like a game of ping pong.
Yeah.
You know, you are constantly trying to hit the ball past the other person. You want to sound smart or you want to top their story with a better story.
Exactly. You're competing.
Right. But this approach turns small talk into a game of catch. You are just trying to make it incredibly easy for them to hold on to the ball.
And you accomplish that by monitoring your ratio of shift responses to support responses.
Explain the difference between those two.
A shift response pulls the attention back to you. If your coworker says, "I have a terrible neighbor," a shift response is, "Oh, you think that's bad? Let me tell you about my neighbor." You've basically stolen the ball back.
Right.
A support response keeps the spotlight entirely on them. So you would say, "That sounds awful. Tell me more about how you handled that." The author notes that his mother-in-law was an absolute genius at this. She would just consistently say, "Tell me more," and people would absolutely open up and pour their hearts out to her. You want to aim for a 3-to-1 ratio of support responses to shift responses.
Keep tossing them an easy ball. But look, eventually you do have to escape the conversation.
Yeah.
And there is literally nothing worse than the awkward, well, I'm going to go to the bathroom exit.
Right, the panic exit.
Yeah.
There is a brilliant tactic for this called the white flag approach. You announce your departure, but you pair it with one final specific question about what they were just saying. It validates them completely. So you say, "I'm going to grab a drink, but before I do, what was the name of that amazing restaurant in Marrakesh you just mentioned?" They get to be the expert one last time, they feel heard, and you get to exit gracefully.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've gone on quite a journey today. We started with the sweaty, calm terror of being ambushed in an elevator, and we learned how to actively hack our nervous systems using our breath and body temperature. We learned how to turn off our brain's autocorrect by daring to be dull.
Yep.
We learned how to listen to the silent tension in a room, and finally how to structure our thoughts on the fly like a jazz musician. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on that idea of the curse of knowledge.
The curse of knowledge being that trap where we know way too much about our own field, so we alienate people with our jargon, our acronyms, and our complexity.
Exactly. We spent this time talking about how simplifying your message helps your audience understand you. But consider this. When you are forced to strip away your own industry jargon, your fancy acronyms, and all those complex caveats just to pass the grandmother test, does it actually force you to confront the reality of your own work? By learning to speak spontaneously and simply to others, you might just strip away your own illusions. You might discover what it is you actually believe. And the next time someone corners you at a wedding, hands you a cocktail wiener, and asks, "What do you think?" Well, your palms might still get a little sweaty, But this time you'll know exactly how to answer.